There you go. So like Jamie was saying, if you do need CEUs for nursing, social work, or LPC, you can get an hour today. Here's our objectives and what we're going to be talking about. One of the things is we're going to talk about what was the promise, or what is the promise that we may have said, and then talk about some ways to cope with the guilt of breaking a promise, the difference in guilt and remorse. That's been a really big topic for us the last probably 6 weeks in the different support groups, and then ways to kind of mend our broken heart after breaking that promise, and then talking about self-forgiveness. So let's think about when we made that promise. When we made the promise, if we made a promise, we made that promise based on the information that we had at that time. That's what we've got to wrap our mind around. We made that promise based on the information that we had at that time. Our loved one was not in the place that they are now. We were not in the place that we are now. And when we made that promise, they may very well have been active, they may have been healthy, and they may have even been of a sound mind. Because lots of times the promise gets made when someone else is placed. So that promise may have been made 20 years ago. That promise may have been made 30 years ago. We hear that all the time. When my mom put her mom in a nursing home, she made me promise I would never put her in a place like that. Well, that was a long time ago, and that's before she had a diagnosis. We didn't have any idea when we made that promise. There was no way that we could know where we were headed, what this disease was going to do to them, or what it was going to do for us. When we made a promise, if we made a promise, all of us also had our very best intentions, and we meant it when we said it. We weren't just pacifying them, we meant it. It was a promise of good faith. And we may have honestly thought that we could keep them at home. We would get some extra help. We would use an adult day program. We would use home health. Maybe we could use some respite. We had no idea how expensive it was. We had no idea that Medicare doesn't pay for placement. I talked with somebody last week who called and said, we're ready to place our loved one. Where can we take her that Medicare pays for it? Well, Medicare doesn't pay for it, but most people don't know that. That's a really hard discussion to have. And then you start looking at the money. How much does at-home caregivers cost? How much is adult day programs? And we can start getting into a lot of money. The other thing that might have been going on with us that we have to work through and accept ourselves is that we may have been in denial. We may have been in denial that it could ever get that bad. We'll work it out between the two of us. If it's me and my spouse, we'll be able to take care of mom. Between the four of us, if it's me and my siblings, we'll be able to do it. It's not going to get that bad. I'm sure that they'll be, and that's denial. Also, when we did place, if we've had to place, we had to make that decision out of love. When we made the promise out of love. Now, if we think about nursing homes, the majority of us, if you don't work in healthcare and you hear the word nursing home, you may be seeing what we grew up with, the nursing homes of the 60s and 70s and into the 80s. Where people could be physically restrained and people could be chemically restrained. They were crowded. You'd walk in. I bet many of you that are on this can, if I just say a nursing home from your childhood, you can see it, you can smell it. This is probably making a sensory memory for you. Now, this was before regulations were put into place to protect residents. And that is not where our loved ones wanted to be. And that's where we promised them we wouldn't put them. We promised them we would not put them here, where people are just lined up in the hallway, maybe wet, asleep, leaning over, falling out of their chair. Again, white floors, white walls, bright white lights, feels very medical. If you have not toured an assisted living or a long-term care recently, then you haven't seen this, or this is what's going on. You haven't seen this, or this is what's going on now. There are regulations in place. And it's very, very different from the nursing homes that we may have gone to see our grandparents in. There is life happening. There's quality of life. I have had people placed and had families actually come to me and go, I should have done this sooner, not only for them, but for me. It's like they've come back to life. Oh my goodness. And then can even feel guilty about that. We carry lots of guilt as caregivers, and we're going to talk today about that word, guilt. But some other reasons. We didn't realize the strain it would put on our other relationships when we made that promise to never place them. If you're an adult child and you're still taking care of your kids or maybe grandkids, you're still working, and you're trying to be a full-time hands-on caregiver, and hopefully you know enough about dementia at this point that you know that eventually they will be total care. As this disease progresses, they will become total care. And if you're trying to work and be married and be a parent and be a grandparent, it's going to affect your relationships. I cannot stress this enough. When we made that promise, we made the promise based on the facts and the beliefs that we held at the time. Now, again, with each one of you, if you were sitting in my office and we were going through this, and me as a therapist and you as my client, that would be one of the things we would be really stressing over and over and over again. When you made the promise, even if you didn't make it to the end, you may have made it to yourself. I'm never going to place them. I'm going to do it on my own. You made that promise based on the beliefs that you had at the time. Things change with this disease. This is a progressive disease. This is a terminal disease. And no matter how much we hate having to make the decision, life gets in the way and this disease goes on. It is progressive. It doesn't stop because our spouse starts getting upset, or maybe one of our kids gets in trouble, or we've got to pay attention to a grandkid. Disease marches on. So I want you to think also, if your loved one were to be able to be completely of sound mind, and what would they say to you if they could see the condition that they are in today? If they could see themselves in the condition that they are in today? What would they say to you if they could see what this is doing to you? If they could see you crying in the shower? If they could see you having to go to the car to scream? What would they say to you? They wouldn't want to put you through these challenges, even if you did make the promise. Would they want you to struggle even with the decision? And would they want to be a burden? And I know we all want to say, but they're not a burden. They're not a burden. They're not a burden. But many times people see themselves as a burden, and they don't want to be a burden to anyone. Don't they deserve to be taken care of to the best of your ability? And the best of your ability may mean that you physically cannot do it at home anymore. The best of your ability emotionally may mean that you cannot do it at home anymore. And then think about this, that second bullet point. They should not have substandard care because of a promise we made 20 years ago or 30 years ago. And you may be going, but I'm not providing substandard care. But are you just meeting their needs? They're dry, they're getting their meds, they're fed, Are they having socialization? Or are they sitting in front of the TV? Are they having an area where they can go outside? Do they still have independence? Do they still have dignity? Now, throughout our lives, all of us have made promises that we didn't keep. And hopefully we don't dwell on those like we tend to dwell on this one. Because if we think back, we all made promises we didn't keep. There's some of us on here that are divorced. That's a big promise that we weren't able to keep for one reason or another. All of us have made promises that something happened, life got in the way, and we couldn't keep the promise. And if you think about it, at this point, it's not about the promise anymore. It's about the care. It's about the care that they need, and it's about the care that we need as the caregiver, the care partner. And the other thing we cannot let get in the way is our pride. When I was putting this program together, and we actually did this for the first time last year, but we updated. And I actually found an article, and I've got the resource at the end, about people not placing their loved ones out of pride because they don't want the family to think bad of them, or they don't want the church to think bad of them, that they weren't able to do it. We've got to push through that. The person with dementia deserves to have their dignity and their independence kept intact. So when do we break that promise? When they get to the point that a higher level of care is needed than we can provide at home, and maybe we've tried respite, we've tried an adult day program, and we have brought in home health. We may have even brought in some sitters, and they're to the point that they need a higher level of care. It is time for placement. When it has become physically dangerous for them or for us. And I say that because I can't even count how many 70-year-old, maybe 130-pound women are trying to take care of their 72, 74-year-old, 180-pound husband with dementia. And I personally had a client trying to help her husband in the shower, and he fell on her. She broke her hip. And then here are the adult children having to place dad in the memory care and having to place mom in a rehab at the same time. And it pushed everything into crisis. The third one is if it has become emotionally harmful for our loved one or for ourselves. If we're talking to them in ways that we never would have talked to them before because we're at the end of our rope. If we are no longer getting sleep, if we're breaking down, if we're in a deep depression because of our caregiving, it's time for placement. So basically what you're hearing here is safety, the safety of them or of you. So some of the things that many times we don't stop to think is going to be better with placement are some of these we're going to go over, or things that we may start having issues with. Medication management is one of them. In a nursing facility, medications are going to be regulated and given on a schedule. They have a window of time in which they can give it, but it's going to be given on a schedule. They're also going to have multiple people that if they refuse to take that medication, that they can attempt to give it. They're professionals. They know how to get people to take their medication. They may have to come back later and try, but it's not just you being that bad guy every time. Other thing with a nursing staff is they're going to be looking for indications of change, and then they can implement adjustments quickly. Where if we start seeing change and we're not a healthcare professional, we may let something go on for a while that we're not picking up on. And then we've got to make an appointment, and then we've got to get them to the doctor, and then they've got to change the medication. And we may have lost some time here. So just having a medical professional to oversee medication is a big issue. Now let's go to mobility issues. I just gave the example. This is one of the top reasons that a person typically ends up being placed has to do a lot with the mobility issues. As the disease progresses, they are going to have multiple falls because they're going to have limited mobility. Wherever you are in your knowledge of dementia, with each of the dementias, over 130 different types of dementias. So our most common, Alzheimer's, Lewy body, Parkinson's, frontotemporal, vascular. As this disease progresses, they have not always been walking. They have not always been talking. They have not always been feeding themselves. They've not always been toileting themselves. They're going back to who they originally were. And just like a toddler has a lot of falls as they're learning to walk, our loved one is going to have a lot of falls as they are getting to the point that they're no longer walking. And this is when caregivers can really get injured, is either trying to get them up off the ground or using ourselves, just like my sweet lady, trying to keep him from hitting the ground. She allowed him to fall on her. It happens all the time. I know you think it'd never happen, but it happens all the time. It's serious. It's a serious hazard. So bathing, toileting, dressing, and I put other ADLs, that's activities of daily living. So that's anything that we do day to day, grooming, brushing teeth, that type of thing. A facility is equipped to handle ADLs. They've got a trained staff that's able to do it, and they've got equipment. When a person gets to the point that they can't move themselves in a facility, they've got Hoyer lifts. Some places have Hoyer lifts in the ceiling that can come down. Some have portable lifts, and they have staff that is trained to be able to do it so they don't get hurt trying to do it. And the rooms are made where our rooms in our homes, most of our homes weren't built for wheelchairs and walkers. We didn't build homes with those big wide doors, but nursing facilities are built to have this type of equipment. Another issue that can cause someone to place is wandering. Unfortunately, and I think Jamie would agree with me here, the majority of people place after there's been an incident. And by incident, it could be a bad fall, the caregiver themselves got hurt, the caregiver is on the brink of absolutely losing their mind, or this is the big one, they've wandered away, or God forbid, they've driven away. This is another one we see too often. Those senior alerts that come out, the silver alerts that come out that we see on the signs, about 9.5 times out of 10, that person has dementia and they've driven away. I had that happen when I worked for the Alzheimer's Association. I had 2 of my clients, after I had talked with the family, and the family had been telling me, but they just go to Brahms and back, Holly. They've been doing it every day for 10 years until the day they didn't. And they were found in San Marcos, walking on the side of the road because that's where the car ran out of gas. Thank goodness they'd stayed on a major road. I had another one that was found in Kansas, but they were only driving where they'd always driven until they didn't. So in the house, and some of you may have these stories of them wandering away, they can easily get out of the house or wander away in a store, a gas station, or a church. Some of you have heard me tell the story of the client I had right out here in Weatherford. He left her in the car. He ran in to pay for gas. He came back and she was gone. She'd never done it before, but on this day she did. And thank goodness she was out there wandering around in the park. She could have been hit by a car. He was right there off of the highway. This could have gone south in a hurry. Memory care facilities, those that are specific to memory care, have secure areas inside and out where they can wander safely. It's okay to wander. You've just got to be able to do it safely. Also, should someone elope, that's the word that we use, as if they elope, they have been able to get out for some reason or another, there's a whole group of employees that can be looking for them, not just us. But that's one of the things that you look for whenever you do start looking, because you need to go do your due diligence whenever you are looking for a facility, is to make sure that they do have areas inside and out where they can walk and roam and wander, but it's secure. Now, lots of times you'll hear people say a locked unit. Well, a locked unit sounds like they're going to jail, but a secure center sounds like they're being taken care of and they're safe. Caregiver stress. 75% of caregivers report feeling very strained emotionally, physically, and financially, and 75% of the time it is women that are caregivers. Many times it's adult daughters, it's wives, and it's daughters-in-law. Not always, but 75% of the time it is a woman that's doing this. Caregivers are often called the hidden patient. I know that our medical director says that all the time. If you've got one person diagnosed with dementia, you've got at least 2 patients. And then these statistics. Care partner spouses between the ages of 66 and 96 have a 68% higher risk of dying than the person of the same age that is not a caregiver. 68% of the time, the spouse who's the caregiver will pass away before the person with dementia. And then this new statistic that we've really been talking a lot about this year is on adult children. 63% of the time, an adult child who's taking care of a parent for 4 years or more will pass away before their parent does. We know these statistics are correct. In fact, I don't know that they're not a little bit low, because we've stood at the funerals of these folks. We've stood at the funerals of the spouse and the adult child who's had the massive heart attack or stroke. I run the support groups here and see it all the time from my support group members who are the caregivers are in the hospital for heart issues or for stress. Being a caregiver and having depression are very, very common. More than 80% of caregivers of those with dementia report that they experience high levels of stress, and nearly half report that they suffer from depression. My guess is that's a little bit higher, especially after this past year. Another thing that plays into this is if someone is trying to be a long distance caregiver. Long distance caregiving rarely works for somebody who has a progressive disease. Sometimes we can do it for a little while if we get a support team in place at the location where our loved one is, in the city that our loved one is. There's got to be local help and support to stay on top of the level of care and assistance that's required, simply because this is a progressive disease. This isn't one where we can get everything in place and they're going to be good, because they're going to turn the corner and they're going to need more care. Their needs are going to continue to increase, and it's going to put more strain on you from a distance, especially if you're trying to do it alone. It's also going to make that person with dementia more vulnerable. I had a client whose loved one was in another town, was in another city, and they had people coming in several hours every day, but there was not anyone there every single day, and there certainly wasn't someone there 24 hours a day. She had a whole lot of time by herself. And I started going in to see her once a week. And I came in at one point, and some of you are going to know what I'm talking about. She had a collection of the little cute little ceramics called Hummels, and they're worth a whole lot of money. And she had forgotten what they were, and she'd put them all in the trash, and they were all broken. Her house was also infested with fleas. There were all kinds of things going on there, where we ended up, I had to make an APS report, an Adult Protective Services report, because the adult child was doing the best that they could, but they weren't in the town and they didn't have enough people coming in on a regular enough basis. In a nursing center, they're going to get around the clock care to provide for their needs. And I'm not just talking about their basic needs. of getting them their meds, getting them their shower, making sure they're fed, that type thing. Because think about this also in a memory center, and some of you may be familiar with nursing care. The other needs that they're providing is, what if they want to be up and wandering around all night? In a nursing center, they can do that because they've got the staff to watch them and see them and make sure they're safe. When they do that at home, it's us that's up all night long. If they want to eat at a time that those of you who are at-home caregivers know exactly what I'm talking about. It's a 24/7 job. But if they are placed, there's teams of people in place. You're doing the job of multiple people whenever you have someone at home, especially as the disease progresses. So what we want to do, and what I encourage you to do, is to have a plan, not a promise. You may have made a promise, but we need to kind of shift our thinking more to, I need a plan. We always have to have a plan B with any decision we make with somebody who has dementia. Always have to have a plan B. We've been talking a lot in support groups lately about the holidays coming up. And if their loved one is placed, should I try to take them home for the day? Or if our loved one's at home, should we try to go to someone else's home? And I always say, absolutely try it, but have a plan B. We want to always have a plan B. And you may attempt to keep them at home as long as possible. That is great. And that's what we encourage. We want you to do that. And as a professional, I want you to do that. That's what my job was with the Alzheimer's Association. I helped people stay home as long as possible, but then I also helped people be realistic about when it was time to place. I promise you, you do not want to be trying to make arrangements for placement in the middle of a crisis. And I encourage you, if you've not been part of a support group, come on one of our support groups on a Wednesday or a Friday, and you'll hear people talk about, we didn't have a plan in place, and then we have a crisis, and now I'm trying to place them in the middle of a crisis, and I don't have time to go out and do my due diligence, or I didn't know that there was a waiting list, or I didn't have any idea how much it cost, or I didn't know where the paperwork was for our long-term care insurance. Those are the kind of things we've got to do before we're in crisis. So the word guilty, this is the word that caregivers use more than any other word when they're describing themselves, because the word guilt is tied to feelings. I should be able to take care of them until the very end. Most everybody says that at diagnosis at the beginning. And you're saying that while they're still able to do a lot of things for themselves. You're not a year in, or 2 years in, or 5 years in, or 6 months in when they turn the corner and need so much more care. All of us have limits. We all can only do so much. I've got a sign in my office that says, I can do anything, but I can't do everything. And I think we probably all feel that way. I can do anything, but I can't do everything. And I said this earlier, if you do place them and they seem to be better, you may feel guilty about that. Well, what was I not doing? What was I not providing? But many times once they're placed and they kind of bounce back, because what will happen is we go get a little bit of sleep. They've been placed for a week or two and we go, oh, okay, now I can bring them back home. And that's not the point. We'll be right back in the same place if we do that. They're better because the environment changed. You're better because you've had some sleep. Everybody's better because the situation is better. You may feel that people are judging you if you place your loved one. Family members may be judging, church members may be judging, neighbors may be judging. And you may have guilt come because you place your loved one and then you have a sense of relief. This is really common too. For caregivers to come on support group and go, I felt guilty because I slept for 10 hours. I felt guilty because I took care of myself. And that's where we have to go, okay, let's wait a minute. Is guilt the right word for that? We're going to look at that on the next slide. Some guilt's normal, but we've got to be very careful about how we use that word. And we've got to be really careful about getting caught up in the woulda, coulda, shouldas. Would've, could've, should've. When we do that, that's dwelling on the past. And when we dwell on the past, we can find ourselves digging a hole down into depression. Depression is focusing on the past. Anxiety is focusing on the future. Because also as caregivers, we can get hung up on the what ifs, and that's future, that's anxiety. So I had mentioned using that word guilt, and I want us to think about the word remorse versus the word guilt. Those of you that are on the support groups know that we've talked a lot about this in the past month, in the past probably 6 weeks. When we hear the word guilt, think about when you hear guilty. A person is guilty after a crime. A judge and jury decides if someone is guilty or innocent. So guilt has this harsh undertone. But is it guilt or feeling, or is it remorse? Guilt, if you look at the definition of it, the fact of having committed a specified offense. But remorse is a deep regret for something that we felt was wrong. It's about feelings. It's a feeling word. So this may be remorse over something that you wish you'd done or that you hadn't done, something you wish you'd said or that you hadn't said. So we need to call it what it is. In therapy, we talk about if you can name a feeling, you can tame a feeling, but you have to name it correctly. You've got to be able to say what it is that you're feeling. And if we start to call it remorse, what I found over the last few weeks in the support group is that members keep coming back and going, that just feels better. The word remorse feels a whole lot better than letting that guilt, that kind of sits on me. Because my guess is that you did the very best that you could do. You had the facts and you had the knowledge that you had available to you at the time, and you did the best you could do with the information that you had at the time. And also keep in mind, hindsight is very, very different from foresight. You've got to be realistic. You didn't know what you didn't know. And today, we don't know what we don't know. So really think about, are you feeling remorse or are you feeling guilt? And my guess is, when you really think about it, it's more remorse. All of us, though, are going through grief, whether we've placed our loved one or not, whether our loved one is at home, or if our loved one's passed. But we tend to hear the word grief and think, oh, that's after they die. And that is not the case with dementia. We start going through the stages of grief before they get diagnosed. Does everybody on here think about this? We're seeing these signs and symptoms in our loved one. We're not really sure what it is, but maybe somewhere in our mind we think, could it possibly be a dementia? No. It's got to be their hearing. They're just getting older. We need another reason for this to be happening, and that's called denial. So we are all somewhere in the state of grief all the time. Now add to that a pandemic where we're in a collective state of grief as a nation, where we're grieving the life that we knew. We're grieving this messy middle we're still in. We're grieving what's to happen. That's called anticipatory grief. So think about all of the things that you're grieving as a caregiver, as a care partner. Another thing that you're grieving, regardless of where you are in this journey, is you're grieving the loss of the relationship that was. If the person who has dementia is our mother, our father, our brother, our sister, our husband, or our wife, and they were also your friend, we're grieving the loss of a friend. We're grieving the loss of a role that they played. As spouses, you may be grieving the loss of your companion. As an adult child, you may be grieving a role reversal. And that's what it is. It's grief. We grieve the loss of the many, many roles that they played in our life. We grieve the loss of the gardener. He's the one who took care of the yard. Now I've had to learn how to use that lawnmower, or I've had to hire someone. We grieve the loss of the banker. She's the one who always paid all the bills. Now I've got to have my kids come over here and help me with that. That's all grief. It's really healthy to sit and write down all of the roles that your loved one played. And if you get to thinking about it, you'll end up with 2 columns. All of the roles that they played that you now have either taken on that role or you've had to get someone else to take on the role. Write them down and acknowledge them. If you have a feelings wheel, you can look at a feelings wheel to really think about and go through and use words other than I'm happy, I'm sad, I'm mad. Any type of change that we perceive as a loss is grief. So we go through lots and lots of grief with dementia. So we're already in a state of grief. It's normal and it's expected, but it can be very, very overwhelming. So one of our biggest challenges after placement is learning to live separated from your loved one, even though they're still a part of our life. And what that is called is our identity. Our identity changes. Talk about this a lot in support group, especially with wives and husbands who've never lived alone. They moved right out of their parents' house into the house with their spouse. And there's a fear in placement because I've never lived by myself. And I'm in my 60s, I'm in my 70s, I'm in my 80s. I've never lived alone. And that's kind of scary. I've never slept in the bed alone for more than a few nights. And that's kind of scary. We've got lots of stuff we have to work through. So we've got to give ourselves permission to feel and experience all of those emotions. It's okay to cry. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to be angry. It's okay to have guilt or remorse, and it's okay for our heart to break. I tell people when they come in for counseling with me, because they're always apologizing for their emotions. You should never apologize for your emotions. They're yours. There's no good emotions and there's no bad emotions. There's just your emotions. And I always say, I would be much more worried about you if you weren't in this shape. I'd be much more worried about you if you were just able to place your loved one and walk away and just go on with your life like nothing ever happened. That's the people I'm worried about. We're going to help you and hold your hand through this, but all of these feelings are normal. You got to be able to name them. And then you got to do it one day at a time. I'd mentioned a feelings wheel, and so I've put one on here for you. This is so handy to have, and you're going to get a copy of these slides. I encourage you to run this off, and I've made it so it's the whole slide. If you run it off big, because I want you, if you can see it on your screen. So let's say that you're thinking I'm sad, but if you go out to that second circle there, it gets a little bit deeper. And then that third one really gets deep. Let's really name what it is. Am I feeling fragile? Am I empty? And then there's that word remorse. Am I remorseful? That's on that third ring out there. It's being able to kind of dig deep into your feelings and name them, write them down, say them out loud. There's something to it. It may seem silly, but I've been doing this a long time. And people will come back and go, there's something to that. There's something about owning it. So how do we then deal and cope with that guilt and that heartbreak? First thing we got to do is take our boxing gloves off. Because caregivers, care partners are the worst about putting on boxing gloves and beating themselves up. We can't change the level of care that they need. We can't stop the progression of this disease. Every one of us would if we could, but we can't. And we've got to give ourselves credit that we've done the best we could do, and it has been enough. You've got to be able to say that. I am their best caregiver, and you are still their caregiver. Sometimes we'll switch and kind of start using care partner. I was their caregiver at home, and I placed them, and I'm their care partner. I still oversee their care. I'm their advocate. I'm their voice, but I'm not in the bathroom with them. I'm not doing their showers. I'm getting back to being their husband, their wife, their brother, their sister, their daughter, their son. And then talk to yourself like you talk to a friend. Don't let your self-talk be unnecessary and create more guilt on you. Accept your humanity and stop that voice you may hear. And when I wrote this the first time, I did have a scripture come to me about not being ruled by fear. So I did add that in there. You had no way of knowing. You did not abandon them. You do not have to come see them every single day. I have to give a lot of people permission to not come every single day. And remember that time doesn't mean the same to somebody with dementia. I had an adult daughter one time come see her mother in the morning. She came back that afternoon and her mom was wearing her out because she hadn't been here in 6 weeks. Well, she'd been here 3 hours ago. Time doesn't mean the same thing. You got to the point that you couldn't allow their well-being to be unsafe or unsustainable for them or for you. And then we have to remember the reality is you vowed to provide them with the best possible care in a comfortable setting, and that is what you're doing. You are still taking care of them, even if you have to decide to place. You honored the spirit in which you made the promise, even if you had to make the promise. You're still taking care of them in the best place possible. It just might not be at your home. And I put on here again so that you hear it again, because we know you need to hear things about 7 times before they really click. When you made the promise, you were in a very different time and you were in a different place. You had no idea where the disease would take your family. And then you got to trust yourself. If you got out there and you did your research and you did not make a rushed decision, and you educated yourself by coming on programs like this or being part of a support group, then you made the best choice for you and your loved one. And you made it. Don't second guess it. Then you've got to stop yourself. Again, most of the time, we do more damage to ourselves than anybody else does with our own negative self-talk. Again, talk to yourself like you would a friend and don't accept anything else from you. And then we've got to shield ourselves. If there are people who question your decision and there are people who make you feel insecure, it is okay to keep them at an arm's length. If anyone makes you feel less than confident, you need to protect yourself from those people. That's why I put a shield on there. I thought that was very appropriate. It's not that you're cutting them out completely, but I've got to keep you right here at arm's length. You do not have room for negativity in your life right now. You are the primary caregiver and you know what is best. You also know when to say when. Now, after placement, you've got to regroup. We have to keep in mind with dementia care, this is a marathon, this is not a sprint. The longest family member I ever worked with had dementia for 23 years. Now that's rare, but it does happen. It's usually about 10. If they're under the age of 65, it's usually about 5. Always exceptions. We got to take care of ourselves. Do those things you know to do. Journal, read, take care of yourselves. Go get a pedicure and a manicure. Go outside. It's beautiful right now. Spend some time outside. The leaves are starting to turn. I sat outside yesterday and the leaves were falling. Do some meditation, get quality sleep, be part of a Bible study. take a trip, and let that be okay. Start out with an overnight. Do a long weekend. Go see your grandkids play soccer. Got to refocus and become your loved one's wife, husband, daughter, son, friend, because you can't be all of these people. That is a team of caregivers that you're looking at there. And you've been doing the job of that whole nursing facility. You were doing every one of those people's job plus some. Just because I couldn't find a picture of a 168 person team, which is what we have here at the West Center. And if your loved one's at home, you're doing the job of all those people. You've got to give yourself some time to focus on you. And then take some time every day to nurture yourself in some way. Reaching out for help, joining a support group, seeing a counselor. If you're a member of a church, lots of churches have pastoral counseling, or they have counselors on staff. Having a friend that you can talk to that will just hear you and not try to fix it. Because many times all we need to do is be heard. We just need someone to hear those words that we find on that feeling wheel. If you've got a friend that you can sit with and go, wow, I've really discovered that this is what I've got going on. Just saying it helps you release it. Watching those self-expectations and making sure you're staying realistic. And then trying to do one pleasant thing for yourself every day. It doesn't have to be something big. One pleasant thing that you can do for yourself every single day. And then you've got to forgive yourself. When you stand back and you look at the decision you've made, being able to say these things to yourself, self-affirm, it is okay. You can do this. Because my guess is last year at this time, let's go 2 years ago. If somebody would have come and said, hey, 2 years from now, and they told you all the things that would have happened in the last 2 years, most of us would have gone, nope, can't do that. I won't be able to make it. It won't happen. It can't happen. I'm not strong enough. And here we are. We're 2 years in. And we are doing it, and we're okay, and we're worth it, and we can start to let go of some stuff. We're not perfect, and we probably did not do everything in this journey in a perfect way, but we can't dwell on that because we still got some to go. You'll hear, if you're part of a support group, you'll hear over and over and over by people at different places on the journey about how we've got to focus on the present and be very mindful about the present moment because we don't know how many more moments we have left. And then challenge yourself to take the skills and the knowledge that you have and pay it forward. That's why we have so many people on our support groups who stay on our support groups even after their loved ones have passed away. Because people who are just starting the journey or who are in the middle of the journey love to hear from them. Now, when I mentioned focusing on the present, I do want to share, and this is one of my go-to stories about focusing on the present and making sure we think about what's important and what's not important. We're coming up on the holidays. If you walk in the store right now, you would think Christmas is tomorrow, even though this is just the first week of October right now, but we're coming up on the holidays. How many more of these do we have left? Do not get so hung up So the story is about a Christmas sweater. Had a resident, had an adult daughter who bought her mother a beautiful red Christmas sweater to do Christmas photos in. But the mom did not want to put on the Christmas sweater. She wanted to keep on the very dingy yellow sweater with a stain on it that wasn't even hers, that she wore every day. And the daughter didn't want to take a Christmas picture in the yellow dingy sweater. She wanted her mother in the red Christmas sweater that was brand new. because mom had always had red Christmas sweaters. Mom didn't want it this year. Daughter was insisting on it. And we ended up having a pretty big argument. And I had to get involved and say some things that are kind of hard. Is it better to get a picture with her happy in a yellow sweater with a stain on it? Or to not get a picture at all and have her be very upset the rest of the day? Because even though you may leave and she may forget about a Christmas sweater, that feeling is still there of aggravation and frustration. And as it turned out, that was that person's last Christmas. I'm going to take the happy picture with the yellow sweater with the stain on it any day over the upset or mad picture with the Christmas sweater. We've got to stay in the moment. We've got to focus on the present. And then finally, and we'll have time for some questions if anybody has any, please remember these things. These are the main points. When you take the time to prepare, there's less drama and there's fewer surprises. So prepare ahead of time. Always have a plan B so that we don't have the drama or the surprises. You are doing yourself and your loved one a favor by being prepared all the time. Placing them usually ends up being the most loving thing that you can do as the disease progresses. And your heart may be telling you not to do it, but most of the time our mind tells us that it is the right thing. And this is exactly what you told them that you would do. You told them that you would take care of them, and you are still taking care of them, even if it meant placement. And then on this particular one, I had to add the Serenity Prayer there. I think this helps us a lot of time with forgiving ourselves. Accept the things I cannot change. We can't change a progressive disease. Courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Got a lot of resources for this one. There's 3 websites on here, and then there's several articles that you can find online. I also added the last 2 there are books that are for children. And because we need to include our children so that they understand what's going on with grandma or grandpa or uncle or aunt or mom or dad. And Maria Shriver actually wrote one of these books, What's Happening to Grandpa. And there's another one there called My Grandpa's in a Nursing Home. There's a slew of books now. There didn't used to be, boy, there are now, but those are 2 of the best that I've seen. Here's our information at the West Center, and we are here to help you. Even if you're having to make that decision, you certainly don't have to be coming to the West Center. You can be placing your loved one anywhere, and we will help you talk through that and work through the feelings that go along with that. Let me stop sharing and see if anybody has any questions or comments for us this morning. You will get a copy of the slides. You will get a copy of the recording. And if you need a CEU for nursing, social work, or licensed professional counselor, Jamie will be sending you the evaluation and the Survey Monkey, isn't it, Jamie, to fill out so that you can get your CEU for this class. If you get to thinking about something later and you want to shoot me an email, you can do that as well. My email is on the last slide. All right, and Jamie, you're also sending the calendar, October calendar? Okay, perfect. She'll send you the October calendar of our upcoming events. We appreciate you being here this morning. The word remorse is such a good one. Thank you. It is so much, it just is it feels a little easier than guilt. Guilt is heavy. All right, thanks everybody. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.